Hello, welcome back. Welcome back for a great day two. We've got a packed day for you guys today. Great agenda. We've got DJ Ricky out back, rocking it. We've got our rotating media hasn't failed yet, which is great. I'm really excited to be kicking this off this morning, talking about AI. As Lynn mentioned, this is one of the most topical areas of, well, really the last couple of years. I'm sure it's affecting every one of you in your industries. It's affecting, how you're thinking about building better customer experiences. It's affecting how you're thinking about how do you get more efficient, how do you automate some of the things that you're doing. It's probably affecting how you're thinking about innovating and building cool new stuff. This is one of the most exciting times for us, for me anyway, here at Pure, both because of what we're doing, how we're using AI in our products. You saw some of that yesterday with Cause and the Innovation Showcase, but also the customers that we're working with. We've been working with leading customers in the AI space for over 8 years. Customers large and small, from small research groups to some of the largest technology companies in the world, such as Meta, powering their research supercluster environment, and everything in between. And what I want to do this morning is spend a few minutes sharing some of the learnings, some of what we're hearing and seeing from the most successful customers that we work with in this space. And what we see is, first and foremost, you're under a lot of pressure. You're under a lot of pressure to move fast. You're under a lot of pressure to show value. You're under a lot of pressure to keep up with the high pace of change in this area of technology. And yet, doing AI, as I'm sure you're being asked to do, isn't just one thing. You get a lot of strategies. You have a lot of options to choose from, all the way from, hey, do I want to go train foundational models, build them from the ground up myself? Maybe I want to go take the models that exist and specialize them, add some more domain-specific data, and get more specialized results. Or maybe I want to go focus my efforts more on how do I go use the models that are out there and better connect it to the data that sits within my own organization, the data that's going to drive more specialized results, more specialized insights. The net of it is you've got a lot of strategies, you've got a lot of options you can choose from, but at the end of the day, the thing that ties them all together is they're all reliant on data. A year ago, you'd read in the news about all the innovations that are happening in the AI space, and all the work that was happening was on the models. It was on improving the models, improving the algorithms. If you actually go talk to people in the space today, all of the work to improve the state of the art in the technology is in improving how we work with data. And so what this brings us to is the primary factor for success is having a good data storage strategy to go tackle this. And this is where Pure is uniquely set apart. We're the only ones in the industry that can offer you a complete data storage strategy for all of your AI needs, no matter what part of that spectrum you lie on, no matter what strategy you choose to pursue. And this starts with our platform. You heard a lot about this yesterday. You heard about this from Charlie and Sean and Prakash and the other Sean. A single, consistent, unified platform that's highly flexible and tuned and optimized for all of your data storage needs for AI. We then go take that platform. We work with industry leaders such as NVIDIA, you'll hear from them in a second, to build those into validated designs and reference architectures. We take those reference architectures and we go work with a broader set of ecosystem partners to build end-to-end full-stack solutions so that you can start focusing on deploying AI solutions and getting AI results as opposed to thinking about AI infrastructure. So I want to take a few minutes and unpack this. So let's start with a platform. There we go. When we think about a data storage platform tuned for AI, there's really a couple of attributes that rise to the top. Number one, performance. That's probably no surprise. Performance is important no matter which of the AI strategies you're choosing to implement. Number two is enterprise readiness, right? As we see a lot of these AI projects turn into production environments as they go mainstream, well, it only follows that AI infrastructure has to go mainstream as well. And this is a place where you're just not going to get there with a litany of HPC science projects. It's got to be enterprise ready. It's got to be production grade. And then certainly container readiness and flexibility as well. And we'll touch on that, on those elements as well. So let's start with performance and talk about what matters in AI. I started by saying, hey, AI isn't one thing. There's lots of different components to it. And as you're working these projects, they're fairly complex. You might be ingesting a lot of data. You go take that data. You're going to go work with it, index it, curate it, label it. At some point, you're going to go train on it, feed it into GPUs. You're going to want to go save that work as you're going along, checkpoint that work. You might then go take those models and deploy them into your operational data and inferencing. Complex data workflow. Each one of these steps demands a different type of performance, right? You might need high write bandwidth for some of this, high read bandwidth for other parts, really good metadata performance, mixed read-write activity, low latency over large pools of data. All that cold storage needs to go away. The point is you've got lots of different elements of performance that you've got to go hit on. And more importantly, you've got to have high levels of performance for longer than, than it takes to clock a hero number and post a benchmark. You've got to have high performance in a sustained way when it actually matters. And this is where Pure is uniquely differentiated. We're the only ones in the industry that can offer the highest levels of sustained and all-around performance that your AI projects really demand. Sean drew an analogy, showed a slide yesterday of a race car. I think of it somewhat like that, right? We've got a lot of competitors in the AI space that are one-trick ponies. They've built a drag racer. Drag racers are pretty fast off the line, but you're not going to win a race with that, because it turns out that other things are important too, like turning left, turning right, cornering, braking. You've got to have high levels of sustained all-around performance, and this is what we do all day long. So you need lots of different types of performance, but going mainstream means that you can't have a dozen different one-off solutions to get that performance. You're already managing way too many silos and separate islands and different products today. This is the last point in time where you don't want to be adding more. As these projects go into mainstream production environments, it also means that all the things that we think about in terms of our traditional workloads, security, reliability, availability, these all become critical as well. And so this is really not a place for HPC science projects or unproven Johnny-come-latelys. In this environment, the niche players who will sacrifice all of these properties, reliability, availability, security, in the name of performance, simply aren't going to cut it. And then efficiency, right? Your time has never been more valuable. I'm sure power, space have never been scarcer. And so the importance of efficiency is really coming out in this age of AI as well. All right, number 3, container readiness. Right? So as these environments and really these application stacks go into production, the need to be container ready has never been more apparent. Right? Whether you're building environments to support data preparation or deploy these models, or all of the measurement that goes around them, at the end of the day, these are applications, these are environments that are highly aligned to container stacks. They need to be iteratively updated as you're experimenting. They need to be scaled very quickly. They're highly aligned, the applications that is, to the open source community. And so then it stands to reason that containers are a critical part of this environment. There's simply no AI strategy without a valid container strategy. And then last but not least, flexibility. I'm not going to go down the path of telling you how many decades I've been in the industry, but this is one of the fastest moving trends in technology I've seen. And this is the last point in time where you want to lock yourself into rigid infrastructure decisions that aren't going to grow, aren't going to scale, aren't going to allow you to adapt to the rapid pace of evolution. When things are changing week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter, the value of optionality, the value that you have to be able to flex and grow and change and evolve in different ways has never been greater. Right? And we do this with our core platform. We do this with our business models. You heard a lot about that yesterday from Prakash with our Evergreen One for AI SLAs. So if we net this out and we look at the platform, we're positioning our customers, we're positioning a lot of you with a complete platform that gives you all the flavors of performance that matter for AI, driven by Purity, driven by our flash systems, with the enterprise hardness and readiness that we're known for, the consolidation, the unification that we drive with a single operating system, extending that with Pure Fusion, certainly with container readiness, right, the industry's most complete container storage platform with Portworx, and then everything we're doing with Evergreen drives the ultimate in flexibility. All right, so we hit on the platform, and that's really the bedrock. That's the foundation. That's the starting point. We then go take that platform. We work with industry leaders such as NVIDIA to define all of the key reference architectures. We've been working with NVIDIA for 7 or 8 years now on all of the key reference architectures, from AIRI to BasePod to OVX. You heard yesterday from Sean Hansen. We'll be part of the SuperPod reference architecture later this year. And the way to think about that is now, we've got the complete set of reference architectures with NVIDIA to help meet your needs, large to small, whether it's training, whether it's inference, all across the board. Building on these reference architectures, we're now working with a broader set of ecosystem partners to build end-to-end full-stack solutions. And we're going to go target those at key verticals, key use cases, whether you're in financial services, whether you're in the telco space, whether you're in healthcare and life sciences, and many, many more. To do this, we're working with key partners across the rest of the space, whether they're infrastructure partners, software partners, looking at things like scheduling and orchestration, data management, data preparation, vector databases, a whole slew of things. I'd encourage you to find out more about this by joining us in the breakout sessions, but I'm really looking forward to rolling out more of these solutions as we go through the course of this year. So to help actually talk us through some of the partnerships and really the ecosystem work we've done with NVIDIA, I'd like to welcome out to the stage VP and General Manager of the DGX systems from NVIDIA, Charlie Boyle. But before we do that, let's first take a look at this video. Big round of applause for Charlie. Awesome. Well, Charlie, thanks so much for being here with us today. I know it's a vacation break for you.
Yeah, no, great to be here and great to see everyone. It's a first for me today, first time on a turntable. So thank you for that, Rob. I didn't fall off.
Great. Well, look, before we get started, I still remember the first NVIDIA product I bought. It was an old GeForce video card in the gaming system back in the late 90s. You've been with NVIDIA for a while, now the world's largest company. Tell us a little bit about your journey and your role.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in enterprise computing data centers, my whole career, and back in 2016, about 8.5 years ago, had the opportunity to join NVIDIA because they were building something new, the world's best integrated AI system. And back in 2016, people didn't really know what that was, but our CEO Jensen had a vision that we needed to bring the best possible AI system to the market ahead of what people needed, because he knew and the company knew that AI was going to be huge, and we had to show the world how to do it. And we've been on that journey for the past 8.5 years now with DGX, with the beautiful gold servers, the things that you saw in that video, to really help customers build that AI infrastructure, build those AI solutions. And Pure was one of our first partners, helping customers make that solution a reality in their data centers.
Yeah, and it's been a great partnership. You speak about kind of the journey, helping customers get to where they want to be with AI. You're out there talking to customers day in, day out. What are the main critical challenges that you see customers grappling with?
Yeah, I mean, we're here at Pure's conference here. A lot of it is around data, because data is the fuel for AI. Otherwise it's just a bunch of computer science and algorithms. But what makes AI useful to you is the data in your company, the data in your ecosystem, that helps you build your AI applications to serve your customers better, to make all those things work. But the world has changed really rapidly. When we first started, working with Pure and data, it was all about AI training, and I had a large static data set that I had to train my model on. But it's changed so dramatically now. Back in those days, it was all labeled data. The very first AI, the cat detector, thousands of people in a room like this had to look at the initial training set and say, this is a cat, this is a dog, this isn't either. But now AI doesn't rely on that labeled data. It's training off of unstructured data that's in your company, and it's learning from that information. One of our biggest customer challenges around data has really been the change in AI algorithms. Like I said, a couple years ago, it was static training data, and then it was unsupervised learning. But now it's taking a large language model, something that's based in English, but adapting that to the enterprise's lingo, their own words that they use. The same word in English may mean something completely different in two different industries, and so that rate of change has really caused customers to really need to be very flexible in the way they address their data, and also look at how they do it efficiently. Because I think Rob mentioned earlier that data center space is at an all-time low, electrical power availability is an all-time low. So doing that efficiently and being able to move as the industry moves, because this isn't a jump every 3 to 5 years, it's every 3 to 5 months now.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of the same things. I talked about flexibility, I talked about efficiency, a lot of change going on. I think one of the things I hear a lot when I go speak with customers is, we see the great promise, we see the great technology, the components. Where do we get started, right? Do you hear that from customers? And I guess, do you have words of advice for folks in terms of where they should, jump in and get started?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest bit of advice, and I started telling people, about this back in 2016, is you just have to get started with an AI project. And back then, you used to need PhDs on staff, research scientists, all these things. But now with the explosion in available AI applications, large language models that you can download from the NVIDIA site or lots of our partner sites, that then you can just customize to your own business. Getting started is all about taking that first step, doing something that may be, easy for your company, an internal chatbot. Every company that I've ever worked for, your internal search, your internal systems, you're like, I know this bit of information exists somewhere. I heard someone talk about it, but it's almost impossible to find. But if I have a chatbot that I put in front of a lot of my enterprise data, I can get access that I can unlock a lot of value inside of my company. And it's also very safe because it's inside of my corporate walls. I don't have to worry about letting the whole world see my dirty laundry or something that somebody wrote once. It's all inside. So get started with something small, but that can really help your company. And don't take on a project that's going to take 3 years. Take on something you can do in a couple months, show a quick demo. And when you get that excitement in your company, it just explodes.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if I were to net that out, don't wait on the sidelines, jump in, get some quick wins, and grow from there. If we rewind one step, we talked about flexibility. I think we both see that need. From the data storage perspective, we've been helping customers achieve that flexibility with evergreen and non-disruptive upgrades really since day one. What are the strategies that you see customers adopting for achieving that flexibility in other parts of the stack?
Yeah, and I think it started, you said Pure was our first storage partner, and it started with a customer need. Back all those years ago, people started to cluster their systems, and they said, I need multiple users to be able to use the same system. Well, now that's just been multiplied 100 times, 1,000 times now that, people want that flexibility. They want to know that the thing that they're buying for their infrastructure is not only going to work today, but it's going to serve them for the long term. So, look for something that has a long-term reference architecture. We started with Pure with the ARI reference architecture. All of that work turned into the program that we now have today as BasePod, and as we talked about in the future, SuperPod. But it's building that durable infrastructure, because all the customers that I talked to, even when we did GTC earlier this year, I had a great customer on stage with me, and his advice to everyone was just like, when asked the question, how do you know how much to buy now? The question is, I know I'm always going to need more, but I've got to get started. But I have to get started with something that's modular that I can grow with, because what's really changing the industry now is people aren't buying a training cluster and an inference cluster. They're looking at one thing that serves their whole business, and we've coined the term for that, as an AI factory, and I always think back to Saturday cartoons. You see the big factory and there's this huge lever in front of it that turned the factory on and off. But, as I look what an AI factory is now, well, it still has that same big lever in front of it, and you pull the lever one way, it trains your new models, it fine tunes those, you push it the other way, and it's doing inference on all those models. So, invest in an architecture that can grow with you, that you can add to, and that's going to give you the flexibility to deploy that AI factory and be successful and be able to grow in the future.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think as we think about deploying, those factories and kind of the scalable infrastructure you talked about, and I talked about as well, different strategies that people can take as they get started, whether it's doing the foundational training, doing the fine tuning, focusing on inference and RAG. What advice would you give, or how would you guide folks that are kind of waiting to get in and looking to get started as to how to think about the different strategies?
Yeah, and you mentioned RAG, and that's probably the biggest advancement for all of enterprises in AI, because prior to RAG, and RAG is retrieval augmented Gen AI, you had to train a model, and you had to think that that model had all the information it was ever going to need. But that fundamentally breaks down, because I can train a very large model, and it could fail on a very simple thing. You could ask it a historical question, knew that, but if you asked it what the weather's going to be tomorrow in Las Vegas, it wouldn't know. It was trained last year. And the ability for AI models, transformer models, to be able to retrieve new information is really what unlocks value in the enterprise, because you have a fundamental feeling about your company, about the way data is structured, how information should flow, but you're creating new information every day. You can't retrain your model every second when there's new information. You need a foundational model that's applicable to your business, but to have enough connections to your enterprise data store to be able to pull new information, something that just happened in Pure's keynote today. As a company, as soon as that slide deck is posted, information in there should be accessible to everyone in your enterprise. RAG really unlocks that capability. So when people are looking at getting started, there's so many great RAG examples out there. I know Pure has done some as well for customers, because that's something that shows super easily inside of a company, but really unlocks value quickly for you, so that you can expand and get better and get more detailed.
It's kind of like the difference between training a doctor and then giving them access to the patient's charts. They can make better decisions. Yeah. So let's maybe bring this back to Pure and NVIDIA. We've worked together for 6-7 years and collaborated on a number of reference architectures. The latest one being SuperPod, coming later this year. Can you share a little bit with the audience why the SuperPod announcement is so meaningful and exciting, and really the impact that you've seen SuperPod have on customers in the enterprise?
Yeah, and as we've evolved over the years in AI infrastructure to look at what customers needed, we started with very basic things. How do you connect things together? And then we started needing to be more opinionated. How do I make sure I get enough training performance? And what customers really got to was they needed not only a system that could give them those things, but they actually wanted guarantees around it. And they wanted to know, the biggest question I would always get asked is, well, NVIDIA, how do you do it? Because we spend hundreds of millions of dollars, probably billions of dollars with all our chip development on our own internal clusters, and we do that to make sure that they work well for customers when they get them. But the most common theme, years back with customers is, well, how do I get what NVIDIA does? I see these great benchmarks, I see these world records, I see all this MLPerf. How do you do it? And we came up with this idea of a SuperPod and a certified solution, which is NVIDIA hardware, NVIDIA networking, great partner storage like Pure, and it's not only tested that it works, but it's a turnkey solution. There's a full recipe. Our professional services comes out. Pure's professional service would come out. And when you're left with the solution, you actually get a performance guarantee on it. When you do a software update, you know that the performance is always going to get better. The same thing that you're running internally is the same thing that we run internally and that hundreds of customers use. And it really allows you to just get your job done. And that's really the goal of SuperPod is any AI, new solution that may come up onto market, it's going to run on your SuperPod. New inference, I talked about AI Factory. That same SuperPod's doing inference now and it's doing training. And so as a customer, you want to have something that's always updated, always secure, backed by NVIDIA, backed by our great partners like Pure, and so you just get your work done. You can deploy that SuperPod as enterprise IT and never have to really get deep into how to run an AI system. You need to know how to run a high-performance computer. All of you do that today, but we take all that guesswork out of it by building that, by putting a ton of engineering work into it, and we keep it up to date. We do quarterly releases, 6-month releases, combined with our partners. So if you get an update from us, it's going to keep working. It's a ton of work on our side. It's a ton of work on our partner side, like Pure.
But it leaves the customers in a much better place.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you get something that really works.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. If I were to net this out, get started quickly, notch some quick wins, focus on flexibility, reference architectures with key partners such as yourselves are going to help you the recipe for success.
Yeah. Oh.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today, Charlie. And before we move on, I'd like to introduce another video of a Breakthrough Award winner. Can we roll the video?
SoftBank Corp. is one of Japan's most revered tech conglomerates. Whether it's exploring new use cases for artificial intelligence, developing its own large language model for the Japanese market, or driving groundbreaking telecommunications research and development, SoftBank needs uninterrupted data management and integrity. With the Pure Storage platform, SoftBank gains a flexible and reliable storage environment that ensures 99.999% uptime and non-disruptive upgrades, while reducing its total cost of ownership and making its business more sustainable. Congratulations to SoftBank for winning the Pure Storage Greatest of All Time Breakthrough Award for APJ.